Well, good evening, everybody. I'm an alcoholic and an addict. My name's Dion, and it's good to be with you all. And Stephen, yeah, you got me through the lockdown for sure. It was good making friends through that. We sailed through it. It was kind of good. Good to be with you tonight. Yeah, I'll tell you. I did say my name is Dion. I'm an alcoholic and an addict. I'm 80. I'm 85, so it's an age thing. I figure I repeat myself. Uh, I'll tell you a little about uh, my story, what I was like, what happened, what I'm like now. I was I was born in Bronx, New York City, 1939, and raised on the grew up on the streets and of the Bronx. And about actually, I was born on the campus of Fordham College. The Fordham Hospital was there, and I just visited it 2 weeks ago. They asked me to talk at the lecture hall at Keating Lecture Hall, and it was quite wonderful because I always college was never mentioned in my house, so it was such a blessing. I met such great people, and we went out to Arthur Avenue, this Italian section that I was born in. Uh, and we had some great food and great conversation with all these scholars, theologians, and academics. I am not one, but I like listening to them. Anyway, I was baptized and confirmed in Mount Carmel Catholic Church on 187th Street, right there in the Bronx, about 2 blocks, south of Fordham University. And yeah, you know, uh, got in a lot of trouble real early. It's a macho Italian neighborhood, and my family, about 250 relatives that all talk at once, and the code of the streets are reputation, respect, had nothing to do with character. It had to do with posing and looking like you knew what was going on. What's happening. It was all like, yo, the kid is here. I thought you were supposed to be born knowing everything. And yeah, so growing up on the streets, you just learn a lot of stuff, and maybe definitely, that's not on track, let's say. My parents, my parents weren't religious at all. My mother was super responsible, and my father was super irresponsible. My father never had a real job. Some people grow old, but they don't grow up. They stay like, you zip them and look inside, you see an emotional 13-year-old, and that was my father. Uh, my parents didn't drink, they didn't drug, they didn't smoke, they didn't drink coffee, they didn't carouse, and they weren't bigots at all. I never heard a bad word said about any other culture, just never talked about. They were just they had a lot of great qualities in spite of their maybe immaturity or lack of I don't know, just wanting to grow up. My mother was super responsible. I gotta say, she had 2 jobs. She always had clean sheets on the bed and good food on the table. So uh, I didn't know anything other than how I grew up, and to me, it was a lot of fun. I had a lot of uncles that electricians and foremen and policemen and firemen and engineers, and uh, all tall guys, 6'2", 6'4", and it was, I had a great family. It was like the neighborhood. You could run from one tenement building to another and visit your relatives. So it was kind of fun. I liked it, but my parents, being my father, didn't work. they just did not know how to talk to each other. They just argued constantly. That's all they did was argue. That's the way they did life. And they needed each other in a very kind of strange way. You know, that you know, that's the way it was. And the more they argued, when I was about 10 years old, I heard Hank Williams on the radio. This is very odd for a kid from the Bronx. And I got so taken with him. I ran up to Fordham Road in my little neighborhood and found this record shop and made friends with the guy who owned it. And he called me every time a new Hank Williams record came out. I bought a guitar. I was so fascinated with this guy who had this Luke the Drifter album out. And I must have knew about 40 Hank Williams songs. I'm telling you, I went crazy. I was like, I got obsessed, you know, and my parents wanted to argue, fine. I go, you know, I find a corner in the house and it was a small apartment, but I kind of put my head down and concentrated on learning a song, you know. So I kept myself busy, you know, it was a bit of salvation for me. And I'm telling you, that happened at about 10, 11 years old. Mount Carmel Church was I would say the hub of Little Italy. You know, it was right in the center, and you had to pass it no matter what you did. You'd go to school, go eat, you know, go play, whatever it was. You were always passing Mount Carmel Church. And Monsignor Pettinacone used to stand outside the church and call kids over. You know, they used to run. But I found the guy interesting. I was like, always heed the call. He'd say, yo, Dion, come over here. What's this movie, Rebel Without a Cause? I say, Monsignor, that's a great James Dean movie. You know, and I'm walking around with my collar up, you know, bopping along like I'm, you know, the rebel king of the neighborhood. And I said, that's a great movie, Monsignor. He said, Dion, why rebel without a cause? Rebel for the truth, Dion. I'm looking at him like, I don't know what he's talking about, because the guys are across the street, all my friends, the gang. I belong to a gang in the neighborhood. And, you know, this guy had like a black dress on, you know. And so I didn't know what he was talking about. He asked me a question. One time he said, Dion, what makes a man happy? And I said, Monsignor, if I could get a J200 Gibson guitar like Elvis Presley and get a hit record, or Monsignor, if I could get a Ford Thunderbird with black leather bucket seats and wire chrome wheels, Monsignor, if I could get a date with this girl, Susan, she moved down from Vermont. She's a righteous fox. Monsignor, I never knew they grew anything as beautiful as Susan in Vermont. I would love to get a date. I was about 15 years old. I'd love to get a date with this girl. She was about 14. Now, I got to tell you something. I'm married to this girl today, 61 years. So, and he would say to me, no, Dion, the virtuous man is a happy man. And I'd say, oh, okay. I didn't know what he was talking about. And I'd turn around and I'd say, Monsignor, what's virtue? And he drilled it into me. It's a habitual and firm disposition to do the good. And I was up to no good, man. I was 15 years old, man. I didn't know how to do good if my life depended on it. You know, so I just followed, I just followed learning those songs. And once I saw this girl, Susan, when she moved into the neighborhood, the lights went out. I don't know. I was in junior high school. I didn't hear a thing. I used to go to class. I couldn't hear a thing. I couldn't wait to get out of school. And there was a black guy that lived in my neighborhood. His name was Willie Green. He knew some John Lee Hooker songs. He was a janitor in one of the buildings. I couldn't wait to get with him to learn some chords and learn some of this blues stuff, the Jimmy Reed stuff. And, you know, so to me, it was like, I couldn't wait to get out of school just to look at this girl, Susan. I wanted to get close to her any way I could, but I didn't know how. I was a very shy kid. And, you know, One day I was at a friend's house and his father left town. And his father owned a liquor shop, liquor store. And he said, let's, he had a bottle of gin. I was like young. I, I got a little ahead of myself with Susan because I must have been about 14 when this happened. But he took that bottle of gin out and we hated the taste of it, so we put chocolate syrup, like in milk glasses with gin. And man, that was a cocktail. But I tell you, I walked out of that house. I walked up the line, the white line of Crotona Avenue in the Bronx, the middle of the street with the tenement buildings on the side, on each side of me. And I thought I was running for government. I thought I was running for the governor. And I was like running for office. Hello, I was like free as a bird. I thought, that's the way it was. It freed me from everything. All the second guessing and all the shyness. I walked into that candy store where this girl was, and I talked up a storm. And I was like, what do you want to know? The kid is here. I was like, this is the way I felt. And I didn't have to second guess anything. I was right there. I had this dream of, with this music I was putting together. It was a bit of salvation for me. It was transcendent. It brought me into a place of enchantment, like of delight and pleasure, above all the arguments and above the neighborhood and above everything. Just took me out, it took me out of myself. And I loved it. And I loved being with this girl. I loved looking at her, she was beautiful. I just loved it. And eventually I went on a date with her and, took her to the most beautiful theater in the Bronx. It was up on the Grand Concourse, which was like the Champs-Élysées of the Bronx. And off we went, that was it. It was like Susan, the music, and God. I was always interested because of this cathedral, this little cathedral in my neighborhood. Who is God? What does he have for breakfast? Who is he married to? What does he do? This God they talk about. I didn't know, didn't have the slightest idea who God was. So it was like Susan, the music, and God. I started getting books by St. Thomas Aquinas and, and all this stuff, So then my Susan, her name is, she kind of encouraged me to go down to this little record company that was starting up in Manhattan, and I did, with a few drinks under my belt. And, of course, it started the progression right there. I always needed that. That's where I got the power. A few drinks, a little of this, a little of that. I'm not the big book talks about a real alcoholic, which I am. I cannot drink, but I'm not a pure alcoholic. And, I used to snort this kind of drug and take those pills, but I'm not going to talk about all that and but you know what I'm saying? I just didn't, I needed something. I had no power. I was full of, I guess, fear, insecurity. I went down, I auditioned for this company. They loved what I did. I sang a couple of Carl Perkins songs and a couple of Lefty Frizzell songs. They went crazy. They were like, who is this kid? I was an oddball in my neighborhood. Who knew Lefty Frizzell in my neighborhood? Nobody. They all were listening to Jimmy Roselli, Al Martino, Tony Bennett, Frank Sinatra, all these crooners, and Lefty Frizzell, who could? Anyway, I started recording for this company. I started getting hit records. I had some imagination, started writing songs, and before I knew it, I was on tour with like Chuck Berry and Little Richard and Roy Orbison, the Everly Brothers, who I love. They had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun touring and doing these shows, and it's crazy. It was like it brought the races together. A lot of that music, you know, I traveled with Sam Cooke and Bobby Blue Bland and Jackie Wilson. It's crazy. So I really became successful as like 17 years old. You know, I got a hit record. You know, and uh, nobody in my family won as big as this. All my uncles, I told you my father never had a real job, but my uncles, they would work for 4 years, and when they had enough money, they would like refurbish their bedroom or living room. Work another 3 years, they would refurbish the kitchen, you know, do the kitchen or the whatever. You know what I'm saying? And here I am, I'm making some records, I'm making some money, and I'm drinking and I'm drugging, and I'm like, I think I'm all right. I think I'm a success. That's an interesting thing because when I fast forward for a minute, when I first came into AA, the guy that was to become my sponsor said, if you're in AA to be successful, you're in the wrong place. If you're in AA to be fulfilled, you're in the right place. And I knew what he was talking about because something was always missing. I became successful, money, fame. Uh, you know, I started just because I was in and doing it, and it just perpetuated itself. I had a great imagination, wrote some songs, and people liked it, and I was successful. But I always felt there was something missing, something was wrong, and I didn't know what it was. My feet were firmly planted on a cloud. Like I didn't feel like I didn't feel grounded, you know. One one day I did this concert. I think it was like at the Capitol Theater, and you know, you have all these flash bulbs going off and these people interviewing you and all this attention. And I took Susan out for dinner to a French restaurant in Manhattan, in Lower Manhattan. I'm a kid from the Bronx. I'm like pretty young there, and she uh, she looks at me during the dinner and says to me, "Could I ask you something?" I said, "Yeah," because I was ordering Beaujolais and Bordeaux. I thought I was getting culture. I didn't know I was an alcoholic. I was just, you know, just ordering. You know what a Beaujolais? I found out what Beaujolais and Bordeaux, and you know, God. So she says to me, "Could I ask you something?" I said, "Sure." She says, "Is this it? Is this all you want?" And I'm thinking, what is she asking me? I had no idea what she was asking me. I had a #1 record on the charts. We're at a great French restaurant. I knew she was asking me something profound, but I didn't know what it was. So I asked her to marry me. You know, instead of getting defensive, I thought I'd maybe put her on the defense. I said, "Marry me. I'll do anything you want. You know, I'll change. You know." And she was crazy enough to say yes. And we got married like March 25th, 1963. So the next 5 years, that was alcoholism for me. Next 5 years was like hell. It just went, you know, they say drinking starts out with a lot of fun in 3 stages. Fun, the next stage is fun and some problems, and the last stage is nothing but problems. So that was the 5 years until 68. Fun, fun and some problems, nothing but problems. So it was the bleakest, darkest emotional period of my life. It was hell on earth. You know, what could I tell you? I had no fear. I never even experienced fear. I was living on pride, I think those 5 years, drinking and living on pride, thinking I was something I wasn't. So you get irritable, restless, and discontent, and you keep drinking. And you get this soul sickness that the big book talks about. And you get resentments and shame and the guilt and the remorse. And then you start blaming people. That's the big thing. The big thing is like you start blaming everybody for everything. And you try to stop and you can't. You can't stop. You keep making promises to yourself, tomorrow, tomorrow, in my world, and I couldn't stop. And this went on for about 5 years. And I run into a guy who was in AA 14 years. I had moved down to Florida. We lived with him. He said, you could live with me until you find the place. Susan was pregnant. I moved from New York to Florida, North Miami, and we were with him. And I used to get up in the morning and he'd be reading a little prayer book. And I want to see, I don't want to run out of time. Okay. He was reading a little prayer book and he had these light blue eyes and they just glitter. And he would say, listen to those birds, Dion. Good morning, and he had eggs ready and, breakfast and orange juice and listen to those birds and his little prayer book. And I was like, what the hell? If he mentions those birds one more time, I'm going to jump across the table. I'm going to strangle the son of a bitch. My head was woof, 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 woof from drinking the night before, drinking and drugging. And I was a mess. It was getting worse and worse. And at the end of my drinking career, it was bad. I was going to die. There was no way out of this thing. There was no way out. I became like despondent sometimes. I was sitting there. I knew I was sitting there, but I couldn't even answer people. I was just despondent. And he asked me to go to a meeting. And I always say that I came into AA through the door of beauty because I went to City Hall with him where the AA meeting was on Sunday night, and we would take the elevator up to the second floor. And before we walked into the judge's chambers where the AA meeting was, there was that area that we all hung out in with the coffee and fellowshipping with one another. And there were all kinds of people there. There were Asian people, Jewish people, Irish, Italian guys, Black guys, but just it was like the United Nations, and they're all talking to each other and they're telling each other jokes and they're falling down on their knee. They were laughing so hard, and I hadn't laughed for so long. I was walking around like, hey. I wasn't even connected, And I knew they had something. And so I say, I knew nothing about God, knew nothing about the 12 steps, knew nothing about sponsorship. I just knew whatever these guys are on, whatever they're doing, I want this. Well, what is this? This is, I just felt, then I walked into the meeting and they were talking about their fears and their anxiety and they were laughing. And they were talking about stuff that was going to the grave with me. Nobody was going. This stuff was never going to see the light of day. Because in my neighborhood, you had to be cool. The word surrender was a dirty word. I don't care if somebody was banging your head on the concrete. You did not surrender. And they're talking about surrender, and I don't know what they're talking about. And I asked this guy Jack. I said, "Well, what's the surrender?" He said, it's not running away from anybody. It's running to someone who loves you. It's running to to a God that created you. It's the most courageous thing a man could do, is open his heart to his creator. God created us in such a way only to work well when we're in union with him. We have 12 steps that are designed to lead you into union with God. This gives you a blueprint for life, which I didn't have. Success, yes, but I didn't know how to do life. So I kept hearing, follow our path, follow the path. I said, what's the path? He said, it's the 12 steps, but they're in the big book and they have directions. And I went for it. I just went for it. I want to go through the 12 steps. How do you do this? And the first book I bought was, this is crazy. There was, out in the lobby there was a table with these books, and I bought AA Comes of Age. I don't know why I bought that. I didn't know any better. So I bought AA Comes of Age. It's the history of AA. And all through that book, they have reverends and priests and doing benedictions. And, there's a lot of church stuff going on. Be quick to see where religious people are right and make good use of what they have to offer. Not where they're wrong, where they're right. So, and then you see that Bill Wilson was sponsored by this Catholic priest, Father Ed Dowling, for 15 years. And Ed, and Sam Shoemaker helped edit the book and stuff, the big book. And it's just great information. It's just great information. And I just, I went for it. I asked my sponsor, I said, who's God? What's God? He said, well, at that time, we used to read the 24-hour book. And which is when AA got into the publishing business, they outed the 24-hour book, but I still read it. And in May 1st, it tells you who God is. It says he's not a supreme being within the universe. He's not, you won't find him within nature. You could go up in the Russian astronaut went up to that capsule, and he looked out the window and said, I don't see God. And he was right. You won't. And most atheists, that's what they think, that he's some kind of supreme being walking around the universe, but he's not. He's outside of space and time. He created space and time. He created the universe. He's not contingent. This is my sponsor. He's not contingent on anything. He's the sheer act of being itself. It's like when Moses said, who are you? He said, I am who I am. He always was, always will be. He's God, there's nothing higher. There's nothing greater. And I certainly wasn't centered or plugged in or had this God in my life, this all-powerful God. Everything, there's nothing impossible with God. It's ask and you will receive. I think a lot of people someday they're going to show up. They're going to say, how come this and how come that? Why didn't you ask? So I asked. I went that night. I got on my knees. He told me get on, he said it's humbling to get on. I asked. I had a spiritual awakening. I haven't had a drink or a drug for 56 years, God come into my life and I felt his all-powerful, his love, his forgiveness, his peace, his mercy, his grace. You find out that God is love. He doesn't judge you. You get punished by your sins, not for them. He's the one saving us. We damage our relationship with him by acting out. And I found that out when I took the 7th step. I was on a meeting this morning and there were people talking about recreating yourself, reimagining yourself, reinventing yourself. This is not like program language, but But that's what they were talking about, reinventing yourself and being the best version of yourself. And I thought, gee, that isn't program language, but I kind of get it. I kind of get it. What you can do now, the real recreation or change, reinvention or changing is changing your attitude. When you take the 7th step, you humble yourself and you ask him to remove all your shortcomings. That's really reinventing yourself, if you want to put it that way, going from arrogance and defiance to humility. And that's what happened. And when I took that 7th step, I realized, now I'm not preaching this, I'm not telling anybody what to do here. This is just me. I realized why I didn't need a therapist. Because when I first came in, they told me, work the program for a year and see how it goes. And if you need a therapist after a year, get one. But when I took that 7th step, I realized what they were talking about. That it's not a program where you get a new mechanism to a new way of handling your problem. It's a God help program. It's not a self-help program. And I realized right there that, I used to think freedom was primarily the choice, that I had the freedom to choose. Don't tell me what to do. I'm an American. I'll do exactly what I want. I don't want no pressure from you. I don't want to conform to anything, get out of my face. But that's not the AA freedom. AA freedom is not primarily choice. It's having God discipline your desires or those instincts, to sort of make the achievement of freedom and joy and serenity and real happiness first possible and then effortless. It's like when I didn't have God in my life, I was trying to fill up. My sponsor always used to tell me this. Says you're trying to fill your life up with wealth. This is St. Thomas Aquinas too. Wealth, pleasure, power, and honor. The 4 great substitutes. You fill your life up. You just watch the Jersey Housewives or the Tennessee Housewives or whatever. Everybody's jockeying for position. I never lie. I'm this, and my house is like, everybody's wants to be right. They want to win. They want to be better. That's the world I lived in. I tried to fill my life up with wealth, pleasure, power, and honor. Once you have a spiritual awakening, God shapes your desire for those things. And that's the freedom of excellence. And I don't have to try and connive and worry about all those things to fill my life today. And because the way I was living, that would have never solved the deep longing of my heart, and my soul. And so I found this joy in working the steps and working with others and becoming people-centered instead of self-centered. And it says on the last page of the program, I think on page 164, it says, see to it that your relationship with him is right and great events will come to pass for you and countless others. And it's a great way to live, it's just a great way to live. I have 3 daughters and, I went on a cruise with them. I just came back Sunday and I didn't have an uncomfortable moment the whole time. It was just so beautiful to be with my girls. It was just beautiful. And, I always tell them, I say, sweetheart, you're not obligated to me in any way. You don't have to live up to my expectations. Don't ever confuse approval with love, because if you do, you'll be seeking approval all your life, and it's not love. I love you unconditionally, and all I care about is when you have to make a decision, consult your mind, your heart, your conscience, your God, make the best decision you can make. I'm happy with that. So that's where I go with that. So I love the, there was one sign in a club room, the first club room I came into, it was behind the speaker. You used to say, trust God, clean house, help others. And I'm telling you, that is the simple path to sainthood. Not that I'll ever become a saint, but you know what I'm saying? It is like, will keep you close to God is love. You want to stay close to that. You don't, that's as simple as it is. You stay close to them, the more, when you act out, you're going to have a problem. You're going to damage your relationship with someone who loves you. You know, so those three things: trust God, clean house, get rid of the stuff that gets in the way, that offends God, and help others. To me, that I just went for it, you know, because there's nothing like these 12 steps. It's like I told you, I went to Fordham University recently, and I did a little, I don't know, talk, performance, did some songs to punctuate the stories. But but the 12 steps come, basically they started with Saint Ignatius of Loyola, who started the Jesuits, and the what was the group from England that picked up on those, that group, I don't know, the Oxford group that picked up on those disciplines of Saint Ignatius of Loyola, and Bill Wilson, when they brought him to the States, he picked up on it. And so it was like full circle, you know. They've been around a long time, you know. The first step defines the problem. I'm powerless, you know, and the second step is the solution. It tells you how to get to power. You know, you make a decision to open up and be open. Very important word, because, you know, he'll restore you to sanity. And my sponsor said his working definition of insanity was believing a lie. And I think everybody that walks through the doors of AA, of course, including myself, we come in believing a lie at the foundation, in the foundation of our belief system is a lie. And if you could get to that lie and nuke it, man, you become free, you know. And the third step is making that decision, turn our will and our life over to the care of this power. And the way we know how we did that is we start writing, you know, and you write down, I don't know if you get the sports step thing, you know. Well, like in the big book, it has, you know, you write your resentments and you know, why you resent, and what area of your life does it affect, your social life, your sexual life, your security life, your ambitions, you know. And it just, and then my sponsor pulled out the last column. He said, if you don't get to this column, your fears, your dishonesty, your inconsideration, and your selfishness, you're always going to be in conflict with people if you don't get to that fourth column. So in the fifth step, I admitted to my sponsor, I'm selfish, I'm dishonest, I'm inconsiderate, and I'm fearful. And, you know, we went through it. He told me to go home and, you know, you admit to God for forgiveness, you admit to yourself for understanding, and you admit to another human being for humility. And I went home and I thought about what I told him, you know, when I told him all the stuff in my fifth step. I reflected on it. And he told me, he said, listen, there might be something you didn't tell me. So reflect on what you told me. And there were a few things I didn't tell him. I was holding back. They were hidden, you know. So I went for it and I told them those things. And then I told you about the 7 step, what happened there. That was amazing. And the 8 step, I just, I wrote down all the amends. My sponsor said, you know, making amends is repairing these relationships to God's original intention. So you know, we made lists. I put down, you know, the people I was going to make amends to now, later, maybe, never. But I made amends to them all. Sooner or later, I've been in AA a while now, so it was a very freeing step because you don't have to hide anymore, have these, you know, if you unzipped my head and looked inside, you'd see a very orderly place because AA, that's what it does. It orders your mind. It puts the furniture in the right place and it opens the windows and there's a nice breeze and, you know, so, and you learn this stuff that freedom isn't primarily choice. You know, who knew that? I thought freedom was doing anything you wanted, especially if you didn't get caught, you know. But you know, a guy like me, it's crazy. I made amends. I just, I became I got my family one day together and I told them I'm resigning. And because I used to try to take care of my mother, my father, my sisters. I said, I had a wife and 3 kids. And my 3 daughters used to say, your sisters talk about you like you're their father. So I went to my family of origin, my father, my mother, and my sisters. I said, I'm resigning. So my mother said, from what? I said, from feeling responsible, for feeling responsible for all of you, that I had to take care of you. She said, ooh, you don't have to feel that way. I said, I know, that's why I'm resigning. So I resigned and because my wife kept telling me, Dion, we need a father here who doesn't get screwed up every time his mother calls. Because, you know, my sponsor used to say, your mother's hiding some deep psychological weaknesses. She's always criticizing everybody. So, you know, but, you know, I loved my parents. They had their faults. I used to, but, you know, I think people really get sober when they stop blaming everybody. That's when I got sober. If somebody said, when did you get sober? When I stopped blaming everybody and I ran out of excuses and I took full responsibility of who I am, who I'm becoming. A man becomes exactly who he wants to be, according to what he knows. And thank God I come into AA because I know much more than I knew when I came off the streets. I didn't know too much. So this program showed me that I had such a good sponsor. He would say to me, Dion, the evidence of you working a good AA program is not getting it perfect. The evidence of you working a good AA program or being a good Christian is when you work the 10th step. That's the evidence that you're working the program. Wow, did he take a lot of pressure off of me there? Because that's a beautiful step. It really is a beautiful step. And, you know, the 11th step, we just keep asking, you know, we pray to get closer to God and his will for us. And for me, God's will for me is 3 meals a day, get 8 hours sleep a night, hopefully, love my wife, you know, edify her and bless her with compliments privately, publicly, touch her tenderly, love her, you know, will her good. Love is willing the good of someone else. It's willing the good of the other without wanting anything, you know. And it's just a beautiful way to live, to be in service. And as Bill Wilson says, he says, you know, to serve It's a very fulfilling way to live, to serve others on your terms, never on somebody else's terms. It's disastrous. You don't want to be coerced or manipulated. That's where resentments come from. Man, so I learned a lot of this stuff, like, and I learned that love wasn't a feeling. It's not a feeling. It's an action. It's an act of your will. You choose to love somebody, and then you feel good. And I learned that early on when a guy ran up to my sponsor and said, I don't love my wife anymore. He had his wife in tow. Said, we're getting divorced. I don't love her anymore. He said, well, then love her. The guy said, but I don't love her anymore. We're getting divorced. He said, then love her. I thought, what the hell is he talking about? And then he explained it to me. Love is an act of your will. It's a choice. You choose to love. It's not like a selfish thing. Like you come into AA, you fall in love, and and then 3 weeks later you're not getting what you want and don't love her anymore. So it's like great stuff. It's look, I'm 85. I still wake up with this feeling of enchantment and excitement. Why? Because God is in my life. Really, it's the most exciting way to live. It was so boring being involved in myself. I think the only way, personally, I think the only way to get out of yourself, the self bondage that the book talks about, is with a spiritual awakening. I haven't found another way to do it. I'm open. I'll listen. If you found another way to do it, I'll be happy to listen. But I haven't found another way to do it. I think it's it's a divine exchange. I gave him all my hurt, my pain, my fears, my ill health, my worries, all of it. I just gave it to him. And he gave me his life, full of strength and promise and creativity and security and peace and serenity and freedom and goodness and beauty and truth. Good deal. Good deal. I just thank you for asking me to talk. I don't know, I was a little all over the place, but that's the kind of guy am. I'm all over the place. I love you guys. Have a good night. Thank you for listening.